I've been playing Xbox ever since 2013, I believe, and it's been a very difficult go for Microsoft and Xbox players because when Xbox loses, we all lose. And it's very difficult to, kind of come to terms with how our lack of exclusives and the quality of those exclusives have deteriorated over the years. Now, is Hellblade 2 another buggy, disastrous, unfun, and really overly bloated game like Redfall? Is it a unwelcome sequel like Gears 5? Is it a unfinished game with still a ton of bugs from 10-year-old games like Starfield? No, it's not. It's not. And I think it's a little bit unfair that we have kind of held this game to such a high standard and had such high expectations for it, despite it taking 5 years to come out. And the press and media that have been surrounding this game, I think, has been a little bit too harsh. But I do agree with everyone on one simple fact. Hellblade 2 is a step back from the original Hellblade. And I was actually a big fan of Hellblade 1. Senua Sacrifice is an absolute banger. If you're interested in Hellblade 2, please play Hellblade 1 first, because I really think that you're going to get a more full experience. I think that there are a lot of things in Hellblade 1 that are simply superior to Hellblade 2. And while Hellblade 2 does have some improvements on the technical side, the production, and the performance, I do think that there were a few things missing from this long-awaited sequel from Ninja Theory. So it's a step back, but let's at least go through what this game gets right, because there are a lot of things that I want to congratulate Ninja Theory for, and what they've achieved here is actually something really worth commending. And that's why I think that the press, like I said, is a little bit harsh, and I think that we had a little bit high of an expectations for other aspects of the game. But let's start with some positives. So on the side of production is really the strongest suit of this game. The motion capture, the presentation, the detail, the crispness, the clarity, and the performance of this game is excellent. This really is like one of the best examples of Unreal Engine 5 at the highest level, because the detail in the environments, in the character models, in the motion capture, just everything just felt like it was so artistically and technically coherent, and it just blends together to create one of the most beautiful tech demos for Xbox Series S, and also this PC platform, because that's where I played it on Game Pass. Even older GPUs, like I saw Alex from Angry Joe played this game with an RTX 20 series GPU and got a rock solid frame rate. That is something that not a lot of new games can say, because remember last year with Alan Wake 2, Starfield, and other high profile titles really had a hard time optimizing for earlier gen hardware. Now, I'm not, the most up-to-date with my PC specs, but I do have a 30 series GPU and a Ryzen 7 5800X non-3D, and the game ran excellent. And I could have ran it with just TSR enabled, but I decided to play the game with DLSS quality settings just to get a little bit above 60 FPS, and again, it was rock solid. And the fact that DLSS and FSR are enabled in this game is great, because DLSS doesn't have the noise or artifacting in this game, I don't think, nearly as much as some other games. And I haven't tested FSR in Hellblade 2, but if I had to guess, keep it on quality settings. Anything below will start to, kind of fray apart a little bit. And I believe it's still only FSR 2 and not FSR 3 in this game, but don't quote me on that. If FSR 3 is on this game, then that's great, because FSR 3 looks pretty good, but I digress. Like I said, this game is optimized for a lot of hardware, and I think that games really need to be taking notice here, because Sure, your game can look beautiful and still run on a bunch of other hardware that people still have available. And man, this game's detail and its environments and its rendering is just gorgeous. The water, especially, so much detail. The character models, while complex, still move with such a fluid and natural cadence that it's just so hard not to just look at it in awe. Because as someone who's been studying, the camera technology and visual phenomena, stuff like this just gets me so excited, and I'm just so glad that this game looks as, if not better, than its trailers. That's something we haven't gotten in so long, and I'm just so happy that a game is able to perform at this level. Also, the performances and the motion capture that was done both in the homes of some of these actors and inside the studio at Ninja Theory. Because of COVID, there were a few setbacks that this game experienced, but that actually made for such, in my opinion, a really cool story of how they managed to get this game finally off the ground. Was, through, so much passion and dedication that this team had to making sure this game looked and performed as good as it possibly could. I saw a lot of the behind the scenes footage, and it really does, impress me that they were able to make something like this happen from their living rooms. It's really something special. Melina Juergens reprises her role as Senua, who did an amazing job in the first game, and I think she does just as good here. And the new additions to the cast are also really welcome, and they all do a fantastic job, but we'll get into those in a minute. Story, Mark. So another thing that Hellblade 2, I think, is a little bit neutral on, not really a positive, not really a negative in comparison to the first game, is its storytelling and narrative. The delivery of the narrative is still really, really great. The script itself is really good, and I think that this is such an immersive game, just like the first one, and it's also a game that should be played with headphones. I played this game with the Philips 9600s and the AKG M220 Pros. Those are both open backs. I tried closed backs, I tried the CB ones, but those just really didn't get that sense of space, and also the stereo imaging was a little bit off when I had closed backs. So I really do recommend that you play this game with as open a sound profile as you can. That way you're able to experience the delivery and the story of this game in the way I think is the best. So in the first game, I think it's a really excellent character study of Senua. It's a story about psychosis. It's a story about identity, grief, and trauma. It's such an empowering tale, and it really did sell me on Senua being one of the best presented and fully realized protagonists that we've had in gaming in quite some time. And I'm so glad that, Senua's story continues and that she has more to tell, because I really want to see her in more stories. I think she is just such a complex and interesting character, and she continues to be here. The only caveat is that her actual characterization takes a bit of a backseat in comparison to the first game, because this game has a bit more of a focus on world building and also how Senua plays out inside a larger world, not just dealing with her own issues, but conflicts that present themselves to other people, other tribes, other villages. And the game's narrative starts out pretty simplistically. We end up getting ourselves captured so we can track down the source of the slave trade of our people. And by doing that, we're able to encounter Thorgester. And Thorgester is one of my favorite additions to the cast. I think his arc was written extremely well. I think he ends up getting like a very fully realized arc. And I really do think that he's an example of how to do a supporting character in these games correctly. Fargrimmer is another addition to the cast that I actually really enjoy. I find him to be like a really good straight man. He's able to, give the game a bit more exposition in a way that doesn't feel forced, because he himself is pretty charming. And I find his design really, really cool. He just kind of lacks an actual fully realized arc. He doesn't have a ton of character progression. He kind of stays pretty flat throughout most of the game. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because I think Dorchester was at least delivered in a very clean way, and Senua's characterization continues to be a really solid part of the story. Now, Astrider, I think that's her name, is one of the characters we meet a little bit later. And while I do think that her story itself, like on paper, is good, I think its presentation was a little bit lacking. It kind of gets delivered to us very quickly and briefly. Now, I do like her juxtaposition of her relationship with her father, with Senua's relationship to her father, because Senua is still haunted by her father's darkness. Because of that, it allows her to make a really cool connection with her, and I think that dynamic could really be expanded upon further if we get another game. That's why I'm still rooting for Ninja Theory. I hope this game's reception doesn't discourage them from trying one more story, because I do think that the story of this game is solid. I think it is still strong, and I think the way that it's presented is really clever. I think the way of using your environments to tell the story was always such a cool part about Hellblade 1, and it continues here. And I think that the puzzles and some of the way that we learn about the bosses we're fighting, the giants, I think that's presented really, really well. Especially because learning to understand our enemy is really the key to defeating them. And I think that's something that's a really cool theme that I wish was just in a more fully fleshed out game. Because, I mean, after all, because we're going to start to get into the things that irked me about this game and the things that I really agree with people on. The game is 5 hours long. 5 hours. Do you understand how short that is for a single player game? For reference, I just completed Gears of War 1. Gears of War 1 was a game that was released back in 2006. That game is 7 hours long, and it didn't feel very long either. It felt like a nice afternoon-long game, and it was a good story, beginning, middle, and end, splickety splat. Done, right? Hellblade being 5 hours long, in comparison to the original game's around 7 to 8 hours in length, it just felt like there was so many things missing here. And it's not for them streamlining the game in a way that makes it easier to get through. No, Hellblade 2 has more filler than I could have ever imagined a game like this having. Let's think about it this way. Hellblade 1's exploration and ability to kind of get a feel for the world was done through puzzles and different types of missions, and all of them felt very unique. Every level felt like it had a new idea to present to you, whether it's the mask bending reality, the one where you had to make your way through the darkness and had to follow the water. There were ones where you had to race against the burning of whether it's the village or the forest fires. There was a lot of different kinds of missions in that game with their own little gimmicks and ideas. And it feels like this new game, this Hellblade 2's idea of adding length to a game, is to add more walking. Lots and lots of walking. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I said, Hellblade 2's world is gorgeous. It's worth exploring. At the same time, why don't I have the ability to, forge my own path, be able to get some of this dialogue and world building, while we're, actually in a cutscene, instead of forcing me to hold the left stick forward and just wait till I can finally gain control of the game again. So that's one downgrade from the first game. Oh, and there's a few more, let me tell you. The combat is 100% a downgrade. Now, there are a few things that, kind of distract me about this combat system. Number one, you are forced to fight the opponent that the game tells you to. In the first game, you could have a 1v3 or 1v4, and be able to pick and choose which enemy you fought at a time. You could fight the heavy guy first, and then fight the axe wielder next. And you could even chain combos between the two. And better yet, the voices in your head would also help you by giving you callouts. Maybe there's a guy behind you who just spawned that you didn't realize. And that made the voices more impactful and made them useful. In this game, they're just there to annoy you. And because of that, it makes me go, well, I certainly did not miss you guys one bit. Also, why can't I guard break? Why'd you get rid of my ability to break the guard of my opponents and be able to stun them and be able to control the pace of the fight? Why can't I do that anymore? Did Senua just forget how to punch or elbow or kick? Because this is... And also, why can't I dodge attack? Why can't I do my little spin move like I could in the first game? It seems that I'm a bit heavier and more tied down, which, could be a good thing. It makes it more immersive, more cinematic, right? But also, I feel very restricted. I feel less powerful. But the first game, we killed a god. We killed a god, and we're over here making it seem like we're getting hit by, these axe wielders and, these fire breathers as if they're somehow way stronger than Fenrir or Hela or Suter. No. Here's the thing. I actually really like the immersive direction that the combat system goes for. It feels heavy. It feels brutal. It's awesome. But give me my choices back. I don't get it. And also, what happened to our sword? This is not Grammar. We are clearly not using grammar in this game, because if we were, we would be absolutely cutting through these guys like paper. But instead, it feels like we're swinging around a wet pool noodle, and it's doing a very minimal amount of damage to our opponents. Because some of these fights go on for a long time, and finally, when you're able to get that focus back, you're finally able to kill some of these guys. When, you put 8 or 9 hits into them, sometimes they just soak up damage, and it just doesn't feel nearly as satisfying. There are also certain enemy types that are just zero fun to fight. Those little cave dweller guys, those golem-looking guys that you find in that cave section of the game, yeah, take those guys out. Hated those. They were no fun to fight. And it wasn't for the fact that they were just faster and harder to hit. It just felt like that every time I finally had some room to breathe and able to swing my sword finally, it felt like there were excuses and just, conveniences why I couldn't be able to hit some of these guys. I'm like, come on. I swung it and they just somehow just immediately have their momentum thrown to the back and they're just able to get away. They just weren't that fun to fight. And because of some of the way these encounters are structured, where you have to fight one at a time, and sometimes there'll be 5 enemies, 6 enemies, you just keep on going through the motions over and over and over. By the end of it, I was just like, thank God that fight is over and I don't have to do it again. And then 5 minutes later, I do a very similar feeling fight. What about the enemies that require you to be focused for you to be able to hit them? What about the cool bosses that we fought in the first game? What the ones that are able to, have AoE attacks and be able to, kind of change the environment a little bit? Especially because some of the best set pieces in this game have to do with the environment changing. It's really, really cool. And the boss fights The boss fights that we were given in this game are a poor excuse for boss fights. They are just not really fights. They're just more like quick time events that are just kind of strung together to make this set piece look cool. That just didn't feel as satisfying as the first game, because in the first game, we were able to choose an order of which we fought the bosses, which is already something that Hellblade 2 does not have. You don't even get to choose which minion you go after first. What the hell? You also were able to fight Fenrir, and you had to learn when he was able to attack you based on sounds, based on cues. And then you would be able to get your focus back and finally be able to do damage to him. And he was a bit of a tough boss fight, not gonna lie. While Hella is bit of a a mob spawner boss fight, it is still a really cool set piece, and the music was just that final fight, despite it being kind of lackluster, it still just felt right at home. It felt right at home. But there is only one real boss fight. There's only one real boss fight in Hellblade 2, and it just does not satisfy nearly as much as anything that we saw in the first game. Okay, so in summary, the game is gorgeous. The game looks better than the original. This game has a great soundtrack, great sound design. The engine, is so well optimized for a lot of people. A lot of people can play this game. The story is still really good. The characters are welcome additions, right? Aside for some, right? And the combat is a huge step back. The gameplay is a step back. The length is a step back. And some of the presentation compromises the gameplay. And that's something that really does irk me about this game in particular, because you showed in the first game you didn't have to do that. You showed that you can be cinematic and have great gameplay puzzles at the same time. You showed that you can have good boss fights. You didn't have to do a lot of backtracking to, make exploration rewarding. So why does it feel like you compromised the game at this point? I don't understand. And also the ability to guard break being removed and some of my combos being taken away in exchange for more immersion. While sure, it's nice presentation-wise, I want that ability back. It feels incomplete. The combat feels like I'm missing something. And because of that, I feel like if there's going to be a Hellblade 3, and I really hope there is, because again, Ninja Theory, I'm rooting for you guys, because what you did here is really cool. Technically, the production, again, is great. I really do think that you need to get some new ideas into that combat system. You need to get something else that makes it feel rewarding, because there were so many times where I was just feeling so frustrated with the combat in this game. Some of the hits just didn't feel like they landed nearly as cleanly as the first game. I do think this is a good game, and I really do think people should pick it up, and I think people should experience it. I even think the photo mode is pretty good, despite the fact I don't use it very much. The fact you can do it during cutscenes and during combat, it's great, and it has cool filters too, and really cool settings. You're able to move the camera around and some lighting stuff too. It's fun. It's fun. It's a novelty, but it's fun. And keep that in there, please. If you do a third game, give me back those combat aspects and find a way to expand upon it. Find a way to expand upon the world, and maybe just make me feel like we really have come a long way. Because in this game, again, I feel like I'm weaker than I did at the end of Hellblade 1, and that doesn't make sense to me. After all, Hellblade 1's story is all about getting your power back and making you feel like you finally overcome one of your biggest demons. And we need to finally just be able to just fight that darkness. That would make for a really cool final chapter for Senua. I think Senua is a really dope character, and I hope we get more of her. I hope we get more Fargrimr. I hope we get more Astrider, because I want those characters to be expanded on more, and this world has a lot more to offer. You guys did a really good job here. but I really do have to question if the gameplay decisions and the direction that this game took is good for the Hellblade series, because I'm not as confident in it. So if I had to give this game a score or whatever, I don't really do that, but if I had to give it a solid number, let's do a 7 minus. 7 minus. That works for me. So like I said, I think this game is pretty good. It just lacks a lot of things, and there are so many things that just make me make me upset. Like, why can't I just hit that guy first and then go back to that guy? Like, why take away my ability to choose? I don't get it. That was the video. Yes, thank you guys for watching. What did you think of Hellblade 2? Were you like me? Were you pretty positive on it, or were you absolutely disappointed like some other people were online? Then let me know what I missed in this video, and maybe I'll be able to expand upon it at a later date. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you around. Peace.